weekends, I like to exercise. I like to play golf. Sports have always been a big part of my life, so that's
Yeah.
always a good way to unwind. And it used to be different sports at different time in my life. Right now,
Yeah.
I'm a bit more focused on golf because it also works with the pandemic and outdoors and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. And then the other thing is I like to sort of catch up with entertainment, news, read some books, watch movies, TV shows, those kind of things. So that's really sort of my unwinding and entertainment. So, biggest part of health in my mind is really I've realized as I've aged is that it's really much more about eating right. So I focus a lot on what I eat, and then of course some amount of exercise and a little bit of yoga. Those are the two things that keep me going. But really, I think it's much more about eating right than actually spending exercising. I think if I find myself I eat right, I think exercising and everything else becomes easier after that. I am not a big shopping person, to be honest. The most indulgent things I buy are usually for my wife, and it was actually our anniversary not long ago, so I ended up buying stuff for her, which is what she deserves, and actually it's my pleasure to buy things for her. So really, I'm not a very indulgent or a big shopping person. The things that I spend money are things which make me more sort of automated. It's not surprisingly, I like to own a good phone, good technology, digital technology, a nice computer, those type of things which are important. Maybe TV, those type of things. So, but really nothing very indulgent. To be honest, I'm a person who doesn't really need a lot in terms of those things. It's just not something that is my forte. Probably I spend more money on a golf course and buying golf clubs. That's probably the most indulgent thing that I do.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.
Our next panel discussion, managing work from home workforce. Most of us have been working from home for almost 10 months. So how does a large organization with thousands of people manage to run operations smoothly? That's what we are discussing in the next panel discussion on managing WFH workforce. I'd like to invite my colleague Ajita Shashidhar, Deputy Editor of Business Today, to introduce the panel.
Welcome to the 2021 edition of the Business Today Mind Rush. In the last 9 to 10 months, working from home has become a way of life. Brands have also started encashing on it. We see apparel brands launching work from home collection, footwear brands launching work from home collection. But we all know working from home has not been particularly easy for many of us. So today we have some of the finest HR minds from the country who are going to talk to us about managing a work from home workforce. So let me introduce you to our panel. We have Mr. Rajesh Uppal, Senior Executive Director, HR and IT, Maruti Suzuki, Mr. Raj Narayanan, CHRO, the Titan Company. We have Anuradha Razdan, Executive Director, Human Resources, Hindustan Unilever. We have R. Mahalakshmi, CHRO, Mondelez India. And finally, we have Rajkamal Vempati, the CHRO of Axis Bank. Welcome all of you to this panel discussion, and thank you so much for making, kind of sparing some time for this. I would first ask Mr. Rajesh Uppal. It'll be interesting to know how you have reimagined your HR policies, in order to kind of fit into this new hybrid regime, wherein you have a few people coming into work and a few people, working from home. How are you, kind of striking that balance? And especially for a manufacturing company like Maruti, where, one can't imagine anyone working from home. How different is it?
See, manufacturing traditionally has been thought that you will work from office and all the IT and consulting company can be work from anywhere and all. That has been a culture around and all. But I think what pandemic has taught, and rather I've seen the opportunities in pandemic, are that hybrid mode has been accepted as a form of working in the industry. And though manufacturing, you need to be on the shop floor to do that. And for that, I think a lot of modification on our work process, work lines with proper shielding and proper masking and all those things around, so that you can manufacture safely. But the policies and all to make sure that hybrid way of working works in a company like us has been an area which has been worked in all other non-manufacturing area, whether it's R&D, whether it is supply chain, whether it is corporate function, or maybe IT and everywhere. I think that has been accepted as a norm. And to maintain social distancing, we had till now worked on only 33% people coming to office any day, and rest of the people should work from home. But more than that, I think our HR policies have been tweaked to manage this per se and all. And very clearly, the whole thought process is that we should have productivity and more, I think, effective way of working than really by a hybrid mode.
Coming to you, Anuradha, how are you managing your hybrid workforce?
There are two or three things that I want to talk about. One is what I call care, and across all our factory sites, our factory leadership teams took ownership for each one of our 12,000 blue-collar employees. And we made sure that each of these employees and their families were contacted at least once a week. And the purpose of the call was just to say, are you okay? To check on their well-being, on their physical, mental health well-being. And I think that was the first thing which really gave our employees and their families a lot of support. The second thing we did was work with the communities. Because one of the biggest things and biggest issues was that the employees faced fear of social boycott. When they came to work and when they went back, there was fear that they would be treated as outcasts, as people who would potentially bring back the infection. And therefore, we worked in educating. We have a program called Prabhat, where across each of our manufacturing sites, we work with the communities around. This time, the focus was educating them on hygiene, sanitation, giving them free rations because many had lost employment. Of course, giving them products for cleansing and hygiene. And the third thing is what I call capability. Because the one thing we could not do was get employees together in large groups on shop floor meetings, etc. And so we have an app which luckily for us had gone live early in 2019. And basically this is a one-stop shop for all our blue-collar employees. And very quickly we use this as the one-stop shop for them to have a small by digital capability program. So almost 25 or 30,000 hours of capability building. So a combination of care, working with the communities and building capability digitally is what is what I believe has really helped our people thrive and give that productivity.
Mahalakshmi, if you would like to now come in and tell us about, how have you managed, how you're managing this hybrid workforce, because some people are still working out of home and some are coming to work. It's not good. I mean, coordination would be a challenge many a time. So how are you kind of making it seamless?
One is really starting with questioning our own mindsets in terms of what needs a physical co-location. Secondly, really equipping leaders to be effective and inspiring, in this setting. And the thing that I don't think we perfected is hybrid, because right now it's remote work, and there are core teams which are out there in the field, and there are the non-core teams who are perhaps predominantly remote working. But imagine, a teleconference where 3 people are in a conference room and 3 are sitting remotely, ensuring that we don't ignore the ones who are dialed in, I think these are things that perhaps we need to sensitize and kind of get in a little more. We are in the midst of launching what we call a book your seat app, because we are very clear that we'll never get to 100%, back to work. It'll always be hybrid. So how do we really optimize physical space? How do we really ensure people book a seat? And again, those things of I have a cabin, I have a fixed workstation, all of that is getting challenged. And I think it's a fantastic time for us to test our ability to reimagine our policies and our approaches to work as we get into playing in this hybrid world.
Coming to you, Mr. Rajnaran, it would be interesting to know how you are reimagining your HR policies. How are you inspiring your employees, to improve their productivity?
With this pandemic, I mean, while there is this whole work from home scene, there's a lot of anxiety. So how do we handle, apart from whatever both Rajesh, Anu, and Mahalakshmi said, I think the issue of anxiety is one. So what we did, for example, was the early days of COVID and when it was becoming at the peak, we said it's important for people to admit to the fact that and go test first to admit to the fact that they've got COVID, because there was a social stigma at the early days. So we said any employee or their family member, if they tested positive for COVID and if they required hospitalization, God forbid, we would pick up the entire tab outside of whatever insurance policy was available. Now this, in effect, is not a very large thing, but the kind of shift that it made in people's minds, the impact that had on people's minds in terms of that, hey, the company's got my back if I get this illness. Now, there was a lot of anxiety around the illness. On the other end, folks who are working from home, their anxiety that, hey, is what I'm doing from home, is it as counted as when I'm working from office, right? The fear of A, missing out, and B, being missed out, right? So how do you handle that? So I think what we did do was, okay, we said from an appraisals perspective, from goal setting perspective, we said it's important to bring in people and strengthen the team feeling and the feeling of participation.
During this period, I myself have written a lot about work from home and spoken to all of you actually. So, and one of the things which came out very strongly was, this feeling of insecurity amongst a lot of people who are working out from home. This feeling of going unnoticed and not being heard. And this was especially more in the case of women employees. So, Rajkamal, if you could come in and tell me as to what have you been telling your employees, and what have you been doing to kind of bridge these fears that many employees are having?
Mine will be a contrarian view, so
okay.
Everybody has come from a manufacturing setup. I didn't have the luxury, or my larger workforce didn't have the luxury, because we were essential workers. In terms of anxieties, whole host of them. Everybody was on lockdown, but our guys were really working. Our teams were out there in the front line, managing the conveyance, managing challenges. And I think what really helped us is we did one thing, empowered the local leaders. What we understand in crisis and others, in good leadership engines, actually you should trust what's happening on the front lines and ensure that people will do right by the community, by their teams. The biggest thing to manage anxiety, actually, we did it a little differently. We had an appraisal cycle in April. We continued with the appraisal cycle, and that ensured that people could say that, remotely work can happen. Even in the toughest time, things can happen, and regular performance processes. So we paid out bonuses, we did promotions, everything remotely. So early on in April, we released our document saying that we are going hybrid. And that was a statement of intent. For me, actually, this hybrid workforce is an opportunity in a big way. And what I would want to stress is, fundamentally 3-4 learnings that we had. First is work can happen remote, but work needs to be planned better. Have a cadence to it. And in the work part, can you capsulize it to make it more skill intense, get the skill part out rather than the aggregator. And there are other transactions that, how can you kind of get it out? So that was another one. Third is the role of the manager. Yes, trust is critical, but also building of social capital through the process. And how do you monitor, people? But the other learning that we've recognized is the learning roles, I call them, the young people, the raw talent who comes in. They definitely need that social networking, some kind of assimilation for them to deliver their best. The fourth part is, yes, you've got to reshape and reimagine not only the workplaces, the policies, but even how we work, right? But I think what we need to think about the human interaction, the humanness of an office. How do you retain it? How do you get that nurtured and fostered? That will be the critical part. And the last part is how, as an organization, both from an HR, I think the biggest challenge to all the reshaping is from HR itself. Our HR managers, when we interview, how we get reviews done and how are we coaching the managers? Do we really think one template or are we able to think multiple templates? Has been the biggest learning.
Coming to you, Anuradha, how have you managed anxieties and insecurities, especially of people who are continuing to work from home now? How are you managing that? What are you telling them?
The first thing is that we really stepped up what I call the listening posts in the organization. We took disproportionate effort to make sure that people felt listened to, like everybody else. Whether it was, organized daily meetings and check-ins in the beginning, pulse surveys, which we said every week initially, and then a fortnight, and every month. We had informal conversations. The second thing we did was we sort of recast our approach to well-being in what we call well-being for all. We've always approached well-being as, in a very holistic way, physical, mental, emotional, purposeful, because we feel that each of these dimensions has a play in the overall well-being of an individual. But this time we said that let's have a very segmented and targeted approach to mental well-being and other aspects of well-being. So we have 5 sets of groups. So an employee, a regular employee, an employee who has actually been affected either by the infection or some kind of trauma or some kind of upheaval in their life, a line manager, a leader of large teams, and so on and so forth. So 5 different groups. Then, like I said, it's really the power of one and individual customization. We quickly created what we called a simple questionnaire in the beginning, which we now call the well-being quotient, which allows you to look at for yourself what aspects of your well-being and your life and work are you doing well, and where is it that you need a little bit of help. So the well-being quotient was again a tool that allowed us to create individual plans. Finally, we already had a sort of an employee assistance program or a helpline which was accessible to all our employees. But that was not enough. I think the sense of loneliness, the sense of, making people feel that it's okay to say that I'm feeling lonely. It's okay to say that, no problem. is too small. There is really no boundary on the conversations that have come up and the kind of feelings that people have had. And therefore, it really gave us impetus to create what we call mental health champions in the organization. So these are not psychiatrists or counselors, but these are employees like you and me who have a little more understanding of what Unilever's view on well-being is, and are sort of people whom you can go to as the first port of call, people who are willing to be a listening post for you.
So any requests that any of you got from your employees, which was kind of, not run-of-the-mill requests that any of you got, it will be interesting to hear from you. Mr. Uppal, anything different which you had not expected from any of your employees that came up, which was kind of funny rather, and did you meet with it?
There were many, I think, work from home, especially people traveled home at remote locations around, and especially low connectivity, all that and all. And for us, it's a very peculiar situation because we have a lot of R&D engineers and they need, a big screen and trackballs and all to do their work in office. So that become a very tough thing to do, to work on a small screen at home and do the designing work and all. So providing that infrastructure at home with all connectivity around is something which was first request came in and all, which in pandemic, taking help from the local administration, we try to do that and all so that they can work from home and still be effective.
Maha, any requests that you got from any of your employees which you had kind of never expected?
I wouldn't call it a request, but it was a reverse request we made to employees to say, dudes, let's not, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it is not something wherein, the human body, if you take it completely for granted and do night and day, with all the lovely intent that we have, for our work and the passion for the company, it's important that we draw the line, and we draw that boundary, so we actually, we've spoken about it, with you as well, Ajita, the remote work commitments. So we actually said, look, it's very important for you to really call out what is your boundary, and it'll be very different for, like Anu was saying, for one person versus the other. Someone prefers to finish the day early so that, they can be with the child when the child is back from school. And there's someone else who has, other accountabilities at home to manage, and therefore they want to start late. So please put in. And so we said, look, very simply on your calendar, just block off the hours and define your core working hours by blocking off the time. So earlier, 9 to 5:30 and everything else was gray. We allowed a flexibility on Outlook wherein you could define what is your work hours, and in the middle of it, block off your detox hour, lunch hour, whatever else you want to do. So a very simple thing. And two, let's not deprioritize. So, we have a global purpose called snacking made right, because we're a snacking company. So we said, look, it's very important. What are you snacking your mind with, so our wellness agenda, we took home with, taking it digital, and using apps, etc.
So has the work from home concept improved productivity? That's my question to all of you, but it'll be nice if we can start with Mr. Rajnarayan. Has work from home helped in increasing productivity?
Certainly, I think it has, immediate answer. Why? I think, one, the meetings, for example, as simple as on the one end, the simple part, which is meetings largely, I've noticed, start on time and end on time. People's calendars are far more packed, right? And because of the ease at which you can actually go from one meeting to the other, right? And I think, therefore, that's one. The third thing is, I think, meetings tend to be a lot more, and I'm staying with meetings for a minute, tend to be a lot more to the point. The fact that connect is far easier has certainly lifted productivity.
Rajkamal, what's your view? Has work from home helped in increasing productivity?
In the short term, yes, but it has given rise to a lot of other issues. Fatigue is one. Mental, not emotional anxieties have led to also within families managing for depression. It's been worst for teenage kids. not just because I'm a teenage daughter's parent, but it's really been tough on the kids, especially given the fact that they've not been able to meet, mingle, or do their activities. Their sense of identity, which is so critical, is basis many experiences that they get in the physical space. That's not been there. Second is, parents with young children are really struggling. People have not been taking leave, right? And in the issue of ki kare kya, what would I do? So in a sense, it's paradoxical. Work for a lot of people has given them purpose to tide through this crisis, because you're not thinking about the crisis all the time.
Has work from home improved productivity, or has there been has productivity levels come down, especially in a sector like yours?
So work from home is one, but I think end of the day it's going to be hybrid. So that with hybrid, I think overall effectivity will improve, and you'll get best of both. So the breaking the whole monotonous of working from home or working online and coming to office. I think what has happened now is, and since I think what we do is we are getting right now around 33% people into office, but we are making sure that you do based on your own convenience, and so you come Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, or something like that. You plan yourself your whole working, so that you get best of both. And end of the day, I think it's going to settle down to a hybrid mode of working, where you have both the options available to you, and you plan your work accordingly to make sure that as a organization you are more effective. And that's something which is coming up to be a ideal way of working going forward. And I think we are working on institutionalizing this whole process, so that this is the way it works, and support with all the policies and support with all the procedures around to do that. I think that's something which is becoming an effective way of working.
Okay, great. So remote working, from whatever I have read and written about, is leading, has widened the talent pool greatly. So a lot of people, a lot of companies have started hiring from tier 2, tier 3 markets, and things like that. Anuradha, I would like to know from you. I would like to hear from you as to have there been any changes in the way you hire, the way you hire in your placement strategy?
What have we done differently in terms of our hiring strategy? I think, of course, there has been a leap to an almost all digital model. We've moved to digital hiring. And of course, early, a lot of our engagements with campuses used to be physical, used to be face-to-face. This year, we've done 100% digital pivot. And then, of course, digital selection. Digital selection has always been a part of our process. But one of the things that allowed us was, I had the power of listening to 100 interviews, some of our best leaders. So what we could see was really listen carefully. So what are the things that we do well? What are the things that we don't check for? And in many ways, this kind of digital listening, learning allows us to fine tune and improve our processes, which we didn't have earlier. You couldn't sit in on a physical interview, but now with so much data, you can see insights. You can see what are the kind of things that we see repeatably for our strengths. Where do we need to cover for gaps? So those are some of the things we've done to tweak our talent attraction and selection process.
Interesting. Maha, would you like to add to what Anuradha said in terms of your placement strategy? Is it any different now from what it was earlier?
I think there are just perhaps two things that I would say from a hiring standpoint. One is, with geography becoming history, I think we are very clear now on a bunch of roles. So we've sat and identified roles which are truly location agnostic, which don't really need to be based out of a certain location. And therefore, the talent pool that's available for us to hire has gotten widened. And therefore, we are able to tap into a wider pool. I think the second one, which is really the biggest challenge, is really how do we give that signature Mondelez experience to people who are joining us at this time. It is about ensuring that they get the business well. It's about they understand the work ethos well, culture as we shape it, and as we continue shaping it, they get to experience that culture in a virtual way, and I think in that sense, to my mind, look, the reality is this is it, this is the way it's going to be. It's important for all of us, whether it's HR professionals or business leaders, So just adapt, so productivity will be important, engagement will be important, culture will need to be shaped.
I think just one last question before we wrap it up. One gets to read a lot about a lot of concerns about security, data security, and privacy issues, which has kind of cropped up due to work from home, with more and more employees working from home. Rajkamal, I would like to know from you as to what are you doing to bridge that?
So one is, you asked the right question, because for the longest time we said work from home is not possible in a bank because we have data concerns. But for me, the biggest learning out of this is, if you co-create solutions with the risk guy sitting there and technology guy, solutions will come through. So 2-3 things we've done. We've got the technology basis right in terms of having those patches, etc. Even for the remote workers who are on contractual arrangements, there are technology enablers. Invest in those. But fundamentally also think through your processes. And because we're in the business of risk, before implementing all of this, we ran it through the risk and cross-functional team, so that we are not in for surprises, and we've had answers to most. But having said that, it has to be practical, right? Ultimately, we are in the business of trust. And in short, one is the part of the data that is available on your desktop, but also the data that is available to, your kids are sitting there, your family is listening into your conversations. All of that is happening, and you've got to be okay with that. Only thing is reiteration of the code of conduct and some of the data issues. So you need to just do that. But beyond that, I think the currency of trust hasn't changed, will not change. I think it'll only get reiterated and reinforced much more.
How does it work in the retail sector, Mr. Rajnarayan?
Specifically on staying on this data security issue, I mean, it's not something which is deeply impacted just because of this, in our opinion. But yes, this is one of the factors, and data security is always something which there is it's a concern for most of us who deal with large sets of data. And I think it's a continuous process of looking at how do you protect yourself. And this is one facet. Yeah, I think that's being taken care of.
It was fantastic talking to all of you, and very, very insightful. Thank you so much for making time for this panel discussion. Thank you so much.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.